Right.
Quickly.
So, I mean, I'm really happy to speak to you as you have quite some background, I think, as far as I've seen on LinkedIn, quite some interesting background. And just to sum it up again, what the bachelor thesis is about in general, it's about what role IoT plays in food supply chains and what role it might play in the future, just generally spoken. And I just tried to investigate or research about 4 main areas. I think I've sent you the sheet. Did you have a chance to skip read it through it?
Yes, I did read through it, yes.
And yeah, right. I mean, if you're okay with that, I would just kind of start off with the first well, direction I would want to go into.
And actually, Mark,
yeah,
before you start, no, let me quickly give a brief about myself. Okay.
Yeah, please.
So once you get the question, once I present the answers to your questions, right? It is important that you know which background I'm coming from, and what examples I'm trying to bring up, in front of you, so that we can relate to the overall story. Okay. So my interactions with the food, as per se, the real food in terms of understanding and knowing food, it started once I was doing my Masters of Business in Australia. So I was studying in Sydney, and I got a as a student part-time job into a big butcher shop, which was called Farm Fresh Foods. Okay, so like any student, I was doing everything inside that shop, from packing the meats on a tray to getting the shop in order. And the interaction with a lot of the original Australians who are into this butcher kind of a field, and managing butcher line of business. I got a lot of interaction with them, worked with them for about 1.5 years. That is where what is the quality of a meat, what kind of a meat is being consumed, what cuts come from what part, what kind of animals are being consumed. And then slowly the concept around free range, cageless, no antibiotic, and grass fed, grain fed. So all these terminologies where people would like to pay extra for the things that they're consuming, because the food feels ethical and safe. And in the modern one, if you see the biggest trend which has emerged, it's all about where my food is coming from. Second, is it it has been ethically operated, or grown, or was it properly fed? What kinds of chemicals, if or pesticide or insecticide, went into the feed of the animal as well? And after that, was the ethical practices when the animal was being grown from zero to whatever its life is. So that gave me a sense of around what this food value chain is all about, and what kind of customers, how they perceive food once you look at it. Give me a second, please. So the second point of the thing is, now when I returned back from Australia, I worked in a startup there, and I came back to India. I joined a startup which was very much into weather forecasting. So they were like, you would say, AccuWeather, Foreca, and it's a private weather forecasting company in India. Okay, so it's also Climate Weather Services. So for them, agri-business was quite a big of a business, because the planting of the seeds of particular crop would happen in the regions would depend upon the monsoon. So that the story again started to connect a little bit, how the food is being grown, how the monsoon impacts the production of the crops, how the food travels from the field to the to the packing houses, from the packing houses go to the distributors, to the exporter, and then reaches the retail house. And that kind of an experience where we were growing that startup, finding new revenue streams, I was very much getting into how value chain is operating for the food. Now, that being said, after quite a bit of success at the startup, I joined Bosch, and where I was, by the part of a team who was revolutionizing the digital agriculture space. So a lot of IoT products being used. I was the product owner for a couple of the products over there. And then I had moved into the blockchain space, where the thing about, is my food sustainable, ethical, and where it is coming from, the need of the consumers were being addressed. via using technologies like blockchain, IoT, and AI.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a lot of exposure into the traceability of the food, and how the documentation is being done, what are the food certifications and export certifications that you require in order to have food traceability, and how technology is going to enable that. So that net Mark, I would say, has been my journey if I talk about just the food and the agribusiness supply chain. And now I'm into completely different line, which is a huge bank. And
Mm-hmm.
let's see what kind of learnings can be implemented there. So I
New
hope
adventures,
there's
right?
good background about who I am, and once I give you the answers, where would these answers be coming from?
That makes sense. Very interesting career. I mean, I got some insight in LinkedIn, but yeah, quite interesting fields.
You should listen to my psychology podcast as well, Mark.
I
Yeah,
will check
they're
it
quite
out for certainly,
definitely.
certainly.
Yes, Mark. Now you can proceed with your
Yeah,
questionnaires, and
yeah.
I'm
I'm just processing because you already mentioned a few areas probably that I would have asked into now, but maybe we could sum it up again. The first question would be what the main drivers or the main motivations or objectives are that IoT is implemented in food supply chains, or like just generally speaking about the whole food supply chain, or just be specific areas. I think you mentioned a few already, but if you would have to sum it up again, what would those be?
Okay. So now, before I answer that question, that's a very, very broad question that you have asked. Okay. So now, once you talk about the food supply chain, in that supply chain, who are all your main players who would be willing to invest into a technology like this, and what would be their motivation to do that? Okay. So, for example, let's start at the dead end of the value chain, where the consumers come in. For example, what would be the motivation of a retailer to invest into IoT-based applications in their, for example, their supermarkets or the hypermarkets that they have? Okay. So the moment, when you talk about IoT, it's about sensors, right? And sensors throwing up the data. How you interpret data and how do you take action on those data is the key. Sensors is just one sensor. So let's take a very, very, very easy example, or a very lean example of, for example, say frozen peas or frozen meat. Okay. The motivation for a retailer to be investing into IoT applications where their meat is being stored inside the refrigerator rooms. Okay. Because the storage of the meat and these frozen have to have a threshold, and if that threshold of the temperature breaches, the shelf life of the product which is being stored drastically reduces, the quality gets impacted, and there's a huge impact on the overall product quality altogether. So the IoT applications are very largely being, the traditional trends where you would have just one sensor inside your cold rooms. So you would have multiple cold rooms inside your superstore. You would have one sensor which will give you a reading of, one particular thing. But now the changes have come where, because these are large cold store rooms, you want to know the temperature at various places inside your cold rooms, so that you have a very granular idea. If my worker is opening and closing the door again and again, how much of a temperature am I losing? And secondly, am I having a consistent, freezing capacity in my storerooms? Secondly, for example, has the worker left open the storeroom door altogether, which is leading to expensive, my chillers working harder and my electricity bill is going up. So everything can be correlated there. This is just one example. So wherever you see, especially in the perishables space, where the temperature, humidity, or actually, those becomes critical, actually becomes very, 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 very essential for retailers to invest in. Okay. Now, if I go a step back, how does the food reach the retailers? It comes via the 3PL logistics, right? The third party logistics. For example, all these people who will buy from large distributors and then ship it to a retailer. So you will see freezer vans again. So the freezer vans again, the same scenarios. You need to have the monitoring of, for example, I'm carrying an avocado. Okay, I want to also keep the avocados at a certain temperature of certain temperature and certain humidity, but I also need to make sure the jerks that the truck faces, so that, the impact which happens on the fruit itself, can be monitored. Is there a defect in my truck that it's leading to too much vibration, or the way the food is being handled by the person when it is being transported by the forklift operator or by manual shifting, is it being done properly? So those kinds of frequency and vibration sensors are also coming into the picture, where retailers would mandate the third party logistics to provide a proof that the shipment which is being picked by these third party logistics operator is sort of kept in a safe conditions, so that they would have those vibration monitors and all those stuff sensors as well as the pallet. Now, if I go one step back again to a large distributor, for example, let's say in this case of bananas, okay, for the bananas, it's bananas because when they're plucked from the field, they're half ripe, and most of the ripening is being done in the ripening chamber, where certain gases are introduced so that the ripening of the fruit becomes faster. So those specialized sensors have come into play, wherein you exactly know the limit of how much of these gas needs to be introduced so that the natural ripening of these bananas would happen. So that's another point of view. And then if you go further back at the stages where the fruit is actually being grown, okay, so then you would know all these sensors which has come in, which can give you soil moisture, soil temperature. You would have the lux meters, you will have EC, you will have pH, and n number of sensors which give you an idea about how your product is actually doing. And if you club these sensors with the satellite technology who give you the NDVI images, and then you club the real data from the sensors on the ground to them, because you cannot have sensors everywhere, right? It will be an expensive proposition once you're growing them. So when the sensor data club with the satellite data gives you a very good insight into how your crop is performing. Now, if you look at it in the value chain, we have spoken about the retailer, we have spoken about third-party logistics, we have spoken about the distributor, all the large grower, and the growing place as well. Now, if you connect all these dots together, at the person who is picking up a banana at the retail store, on a click of a QR is able to look at this particular banana came from this place. I know because of the sensors that the chemicals and pesticides were used less in this area. No deforestation was happened because I can look through the satellite that they are using ethical practices. The certificate which is available from the sensor data from the grower that the ripening was performed properly. I know there was a less damage happened because the third party logistics person managed it, and the retailer always kept it at a good condition. So I am very, very sure that the products are in right condition. So that's how the sensor is able to connect all this data and bring all these data to the end customer to increase his confidence into the product. That's one. And secondly, while it's traveling into its journey, is able to reduce the operational expenses, which were earlier unseen. So I'll probably stop for that, first answer to the first question. Otherwise, I'll be speaking all day, right?
No, it makes a lot of sense. It was very insightful, definitely. Just would you see the extrinsic factor as the larger one, so that the customers have more transparency and are willing to pay for that more, or would you say the operational savings play the bigger role? Because when speaking about food, the profit margins are not as large, maybe. Do you think, especially also sensors you just mentioned, that control that monitor the gases coming out? How does an investment into that relate to the savings of, for instance, food going to waste? Is that practicable? Is that feasible?
Yeah, good question, Mark. So there are two parts to the question. Okay. One is that saying that what is the motivation for me implementing the IoT devices? Is it that I will be able to earn more money by highlighting the provenance of the food, or the ethical transport communication? I would say this is still a growing trend. People trust their brands to show them that this is the journey of the food, but this is not I would say it is a good to have thing, not a must have thing. Must have thing is the amount of the food which gets wasted in the value chain, the leakages which happen, those need to be contained, because the the margins and the competition at the consumer level is quite harsh. unless until you go down and bring the operational efficiency into your whole operations, the whole business becomes unviable, I would say, and your operational margins take a hit. Coming to the question, like for example, for a person who is operating a ripening chamber, okay, a person in a ripening chamber has to precisely remove the products at a particular date of time, so that during the journey from his warehouse to the retail store, he has to ensure that the bananas are in that stage of ripeness so that the maximum shelf life of the bananas can be achieved at the store as well. This is just an example. I'm just taking banana as an example. So definitely, the kind of the precision which every step is taking in the value chain is acting as a competitive advantage for the retailer to have that product on the shelves for a longer time and the freshest, so that they can their margins increase as well. So I would say the latter one, in which the operational expenses can be reduced, and you have a better control on your supply chain so that you can elongate the shelf life and reduce the wastage, is the key driver where IoT adoption is coming in.
Makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you already kind of implied at the moment the cooperation of several supply chain participants. In practice, how realistic is that, or is that working, that maybe companies that might have an interest to hold back on data as well throughout the whole supply chain are actually cooperating and have an integrated IoT solution? Is that practical?
See, if you look at it, Mark, to tell you honestly, it's a very nice question as well. The whole world is moving towards the platform economy. The people who own the platform are sort of owning the whole game. Okay, so the major threat that comes to the existing players out there, all the big names, I don't want to take those names, the threat which emerges is the all of a sudden emergence of a platform which is able to combine most of their competitors on one platform, and is able to provide a unique solution out there. Okay, so for example, in the future, you go to a warehouse or a retail store where you can buy from Walmart, where you can buy from LD, where you can buy from Google, where you can buy from Kaufland, wherever. So those platform games are emerging. That is why the real threat or the scale of businesses that these guys want to create for the retailers, I would say, is more towards having more control over their supply chain, as well as because they interface with the consumer the largest. So for example, I have 5,000 stores across the US. So I have that, control point is with me. I can leverage my, control power to get the suppliers in line saying that I want this data because you give me this data because my consumers are asking for me, and this is going to act as a competitive advantage for me. So it is these people who have those control points are driving this transformation. Because one is, like you said, the consumer wants to know the world is changing. Second is, if they have that visibility, they have a better control over their suppliers, and the suppliers have a better control. And you have one up, one down visibility currently. That visibility increases. You have one down, two down, three down, and that way. So this is what is happening, Mark. I hope that gives you a sense of what you had asked.
Certainly. Still, one tiny question about that is like that came to my mind is, who has the bigger interest in implementing or driving the IT implementation as a focal company? Is it the retailer, big retail companies, or the producer collaborations?
I think it's a big retailers.
Yeah,
it's a big retailers who would be driving, because the control point lies with them. Unless until a food manufacturer has its own retail outlets, then he has the control point to drive the decisions in IoT and technology.
All right. When it comes to the implementation of IoT, do you have the impression, or do you think that this leads to a restructuring of the business processes, or does IoT primarily support the existing processes?
IoT mostly supports the existing process, Mark. It's nothing revolutionary. Okay, the devices are becoming smarter. The world is getting connected. You have internet connectivity. So I would say, rather than it's about sharing of the business processes.
Mm-hmm.
So, where this IoT data primarily becomes a part of your contract once you're performing your contracting activities with a partner. So you would say that, the business processes become shared and automated if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a device driven decision making that you're doing at the device level.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it becomes a part of the contract. Yes.
Just the concept I've read of, and what I thought about now was, for instance, the potential or theoretical possibility to reroute containers when, for instance, it was sensed that fruits were becoming or bad or turning to waste a little faster than expected, that you could reroute those. If you would implement such a solution, it would kind of be a new business process or a new process, right? That's kind of what I thought about theoretically.
Yeah, that's if we reach that stage where if all the retail, if in a particular state you have say for example 500 retail stores, and then you can strategically plan the movement of your goods on the basis of the shelf life. And then you say that these producers will go to the nearest distribution center because I can achieve more shelf life out of it because I have the IoT data to back for it. So that is possible, but still we haven't reached that stage, Mark, yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a possibility that we might reach that stage. Reason being, there is still a lot of disconnect between the physical movement of the good and the movement of the data of the goods. So because it happens in such a mass scale, pallets by pallets, and the container by container, and then at a distribution house, one container would break into multiple things. And then those things happen. So maintaining the traceability of the data as well as a challenge.
Yeah, true. That kind of perfectly gets into the next kind of set of questions or field of interest, which is the data analysis or the use of the data themselves. Because obviously, if you implement such an IoT solution on large scale, it brings about vast amounts of data, right? How is this data processed at the moment, or would be processed in a sensible way? Would it be processed in silos, for instance, or holistic as a holistic view?
Sure. So the latest thing, Mark, if you read the reports, it's about edge computing, which has come in. Okay. So if you know about edge computing, the processing of the data would happen at the node itself, where the data is being collected. So you do not need to push all the data to a cloud or an on-prem server and then fetch the data and perform the analytics. That is why you see a major trend where the sensors are coming in with microprocessors, and microprocessors are becoming stronger and stronger every day. So, for example, if a sensor detects a breach, okay, in traditional way, all the data would go to a cloud where your AI engine would look at the threshold breach and then alert. Nowadays, what is happening is at the node level, the breach can be detected because the processors are becoming smarter and the sensors are becoming smarter, and then able to, alert at the point level where the mistake has been. So you don't have to wait for the whole cloud communication. And the second advantage with that edge computing that comes in is, you save a lot of data costs. You only send what is required and you only send the process data. For example, you only want to send the events, the error events. You don't want to sell all the data of temperature, humidity, and everything. That is also possible. Imagine how much amount of, savings in the data communication and all that happens once you have millions and millions of sensors. The other thing that happens is, since you have the computing capabilities at the edge on every sensor, the possibilities of manipulating the data drastically reduces because all your data is not going to the cloud and all the devices are individually working now. Right? Makes sense, right? So,
Totally,
and hacker would have to go and hack every single sensor in order to, if he wants to do a Bitcoin like attack like Byzantine and stuff, get 51% stake. That. Yeah. So those are the advantages where edge computing is coming in, and how the data will be managed.
Two little things. As you mentioned, definitely makes sense that edge computing or edge intelligence reduces the amount of data that needs to be sent. but the data that is transmitted heavily depends on the kind of sensor or actuator as well, right? Brings me back to a simple question: what are the main parameters that are currently used and employed, or because such things as temperature might have a completely different necessity of data than maybe video, how does it say, image recognition, for instance, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, me too. So, there are two different questions, Mark, to answer honestly. One is the data that you're collecting from physical senses. That is what. Okay. So anything you got: temperature, humidity, vibration, hardness, moisture, humidity, etc., ethylene, nitrogen, nitrous, whatever. It's all coming from physical sensors. The second thing that is taking it in the industry is using the computer vision. Okay. How can I look at, 1 lakh or, 2 million, 5 million, 10 billion bananas? And then next time, once I look at the 10 billionth plus one banana, I'm able to detect its shelf life. So you see, the machine learning is actually acting as a game changer in the industry, but also still with a lot of flaws. So for example, what happens is, if you look at blueberries, okay? So at what stage the blueberry has 7 to 8 different stages of ripeness. Okay, it has to be picked at a particular point of ripeness to be used. If the ripeness of the blueberry is not proper, the shape and the dimensions and everything will be fault. So once it goes for the inspection into the exports and stuff, you will see there are defects, and the buyer will reject it. Computer vision is coming in as a technology which is able to do the inspection of all these goods and all these food and stuff which is going out, and is able to tell you the grading of the product altogether. So there is one aspect where you use IoT and stuff to find, if the food is good from the inside and stuff. And second is the machine learning based computer vision techniques, which are able to tell you, I'll try to predict what the quality of the food is. Hope that answers the question.
It does, in a way I didn't thought about in the first place, but yeah, definitely. When it comes to the data processing, does automation already play a big factor? Does it like which amount are already decisions made or automated based on reaching certain parameters or thresholds?
Right. No, so automation is quite a bit, Mark, quite a bit. For example, if you look at these large cold storages, okay, which are storing all those commodities and stuff, the inventory management is very much automated. Okay, the data management is at least you get the breaches in the threshold and stuff to be there. Okay, automatic alerts and escalations are into place. So in a lot of way, data has been automated because it's not that complex data. It's not that complex. It's a simple temperature, humidity, and some of that data, and how that data is being showed into graphs and how the reporting is being done. Mostly automation is there. How the escalation matrices and matrices are being maintained. I would say that's about it when it's come to the automation. But when you talk about the intelligence coming in the automation, that is where the major work is being done. I think we have already crossed the field of automation. It's moving more towards the intelligence now.
All right. One thing to come back to the solutions, just for a short bit to terminate that bit. I mean, how is the integratability from the perspective of solutions or devices at the moment? Are there any standards or standardized interfaces, or how is that situation at the moment?
It's quite getting into standardized. Yeah, like the preferred medium is either serial bus or RS482 currently. But then it's slowly moving towards the USB Type-C and everything. The new sensors that you see are coming with these normal USB ports where you can connect your mobile charger and get the data straight up. So slowly the world is moving toward from the industrialized method to more consumer-centric methods. Wherein, earlier you would find those sensors into the shelf of, the warehouses or specialty stores. Then slowly they're moving into Amazon, and even you can find those pickup from your, retail marts as well. So even the ports and how the data is being communicated via buses or whatever kind of a communication methods, or even Wi-Fi, no. So you see, you're able to connect your devices with the Wi-Fi. So a lot of standardization is already reaching there, and I guess as the Wi-Fi goes, when the 5G penetration happens, we will see a larger impact.
All right. One thing that also connects to the standardization is kind of what do you think about out-of-the-box solutions in comparison to customized solutions? I mean, there are some offerings of ready-made sensor packages, if you will, some crates.
Varies, Mark. To tell you honestly, shortly, a very short answer to that. Varies on the kind of an application you want to do, Mark. Okay. So for example, if you have a fleet of trucks which are only doing, frozen perishables and stuff. Okay. Or you're doing fresh food or deli. Okay, so then you would actually, I'd like to have a customized solution for you, because you would like to have because your products are fragile, you would like to vibration and everything to be inserted. But not if you are selling like a thing that won't break. For example, turkey, or for example, blocks of meat. You won't really care, right? There'll be minimal damage, the packaging would be good, and all that stuff would happen. So it varies, Mark. And no general statement can be made on that point.
Yeah, makes sense. It's just I heard polarizing statements about that issue, but that's probably the most holistic view of it. Definitely, it depends. All right. One thing that's also with concerns to the data management, if you've been talking about the blueberries, for instance, at some point, I mean, either by machine learning or like through agreements, certain parameters or certain thresholds have to be agreed upon, right? Is that something where the willingness to share this data either across the industry or across the food supply chain does exist, or is that something that the data is?
The thing is, because the exports happening and the quality of food demanded by the Western countries, the standards are set quite high. Now, in order for our our third world countries who are producing most of these products, in order to maintain that quality expectations, there are certain guidelines which are into place. And I guess, those guidelines are pretty much well communicated across the value chain, where everyone has to adhere to that. Otherwise, the whole business falls down. And because of that threat, the supplier might not be able to give me enough quantity with the quality that I want. You see most of the vertical integrations, corporations going into these countries and doing vertical integration, doing contract farming and all those stuff happening, because you want to ensure that the quality, you're able to match the demands with the quality which is being expected by the customer.
All right.
Yeah, so that
makes sense. Currently, if I asked you about the current barriers or challenges that still exist that might impair the evolution of IoT in the food sector at the moment, what would come to your mind?
The broken supply chains, Mark. Our supply chains are still very broken. For example, if you consume a yogurt, okay, the milk would be coming from somewhere else, the bacteria would be coming from somewhere else, the sugar will be coming from somewhere else, the packaging would be coming from somewhere else, the flavor would be coming from somewhere else. And then once everyone is coming in such large quantities at one place, imagine how much traceability and how much quality control can you have till the last mile. Because if you're talking about sugar, then you go to the sugar growing trader. Then the trader tells you, oh, I bought this from this sugar mill. Then sugar mill tells you, oh, I bought this from this particular farmer somewhere there. Okay, so the broken supply chains, although it sounds very easy when we say, oh, food supply chains, but those supply chains are really complex. So, unless until the standardization and the platforming thing happens, where everyone gets streamlined to a process and you have a visibility channel established, I don't that's a major challenge, Mark. where the evolution will happen.
So do I get that right, that you imply that this is changing continuously over the time? This,
It is changing. It is changing. Yes,
okay.
yes. Because the demands of the consumer is driving that change.
All right. And how is it like when speaking about something like the general acceptance of that technology? Is that still is that something where people already see the value, or are there reluctances still?
Still, Mark, still, we are yet to reach that maturity. We're not there. We're not there. At least from my understanding of the European market that I have seen, and a little bit of North American market, I see it's slowly growing, but the pace is quite slow, Mark. It's going to take some time.
All right. And when talking about the most promising or interesting developments at the moment, or if you say it, that one thing is driving the whole thing, apart from customer demand, as you mentioned, one technical development or evolution, is there something which is the carrier of hope, if you will? A weird way to express that, sorry.
So the food regulation laws which has come in, right? Like FSMA from Food Safety Modernization Act in the US, okay, which says that every food that is being served needs to be traceable. Every food, every food that you do. That those are the kinds of regulations which are driven from the top down, no? Actually would bring that radical change into the how food travels to our plate from the field. That's actually, I think, would drive that change.
All right. And one last thing, you already mentioned that in a way in connection with the edge computing, that the data is less vulnerable. When just stepping back a little and talking about the data issues in general, like data privacy or accuracy or ownership, what do you think about that topic in that in this context?
It's a huge debate that we both can do on this topic, and the whole world can do, because data is more valuable than the product itself. Okay. If I know from the past data of a third-party logistics that if he delivers me X quantity, my wastage on the shelf at the retail store is Y%. I go and experiment with a different third-party logistic provider, and I see that if he delivers me X%, the wastage is Y-2. So you see, it's not the actual product at all which is making that difference. It's the data. It's the collation of the data, and it's the insights that you're generating from the data. So how willing would you, as a third-party logistics provider, be willing to open that data to a retailer and get your own business at risk? That's one. Second, are you confident enough for your business that my supply chain and my data is so accurate that nobody else can beat me? So that's the ethical dilemma which comes with the technology, because you're risking your own future business if and these days any food poisoning incident or anything would create a huge shock, and the brand name takes a hit. So everyone likes to stay very cautious into how you implement technology, what data you share, and who owns the data.
Yeah, that does sound like a big challenge, honestly. Maybe the biggest one at the moment. Is it actually, when are there any benchmarks that you're familiar with when it comes to something like cost saving or waste reduction or so on? Are there any that probably goes hand in hand with the problematic you just mentioned, that data sharing is done in a very reluctant way?
There's no benchmark, Mark. There's no benchmark. Varies from industry to industry, varies from value chain to value chain. What interventions are being taken? So it would be hard to pinpoint a benchmark there.
Makes sense. That actually covered pretty impressively the fields I planned. Is there anything? I mean, I'm currently getting into that topic, and you're obviously a professional. So my last approach, my last question would be if there is something interesting that I kind of missed in this. Obviously, there's a lot we haven't talked about, but if you had something that you would say that is important that was left out.
Give me a sense of what are you going to do when you go in PwC? What are you going to do?
Pardon me?
Or this data is going to be helpful for you for completing this project? Or are you willing to take this project further up in PwC and do something about it, like be consultant in food and agribusiness domain? What are your plans?
For the bachelor thesis at the moment, do you mean, or where this goes? Well, at the moment, this is only about the bachelor thesis, and I will complete it by the start of November. But just for the simple reason that I will begin working at that time, so I won't be able to invest that much time anymore into it. However, when it comes to the general topic of IoT and food supply chains, I have to say that I've gotten increasingly interested in it. I mean, I started up with an idea of it and got more and more into it. So I've already spoken to my employer about that, if it was possible to get in that direction. So we'll see where that goes. But I definitely plan to, yeah.
So Marc, my one piece of advice would be, get into the quality grading line. Okay. The food which is being picked from the farm, that the time which is being picked up. Okay. Me as a retailer at the end of the value chain, is there a way I can cross all those broken supply chains and still assure that the best of the product is being picked for my retail store? And that is where the technology is going to play a vital importance. And that is where these big boys will be interested in, getting people who can bridge this gap. Because what happens is, as the product travels across the value chain, there are different buyers who come and bid. If I have a sense that the particular grade of products which is coming from this particular region or a farm, I can bypass all this noises and go straight there and pick and go. So that is one line where maybe you should put your focus on how can I bypass all those noises and go straight and find a technology or an intervention that can add value. I see you smiling. Your brain is running.
No, it makes sense to me. I was just wondering if that was an academic approach or if you were giving me professional advice where to start a business, maybe. So I was just going through my chances of starting a business there. But yeah. So
you're a smart guy. You'll figure it out now.
Yes, certainly. But would that also be like something that you see as likely that something like that happens through maybe driven through IoT, that the supply chains get like more directly with less middlemen, not only less fragmented, but also erasing many middlemen as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you club satellites, the satellite technologies with on-ground sensors and computer vision, okay, this is possible. And this is being done by a lot of smart guys out there.
Yeah, interesting field. Many areas that are currently evolving.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, that kind of is a motivation. Honestly, that is a good thought. In the end, I will definitely follow that thought for some time.
I'm happy I could at least transfer some part of my knowledge to you, Marc.
You definitely were able to do that. It was very insightful and many also different perspectives that I haven't had beforehand, which definitely helped me to gain a different perspective, a different angle on the whole topic.
Once I come to Berlin, I'll come to your business then.
Yeah. Please. might take a few weeks more, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I was there. I just traveled twice there. It was once for the Bosch Connect World Conference, which was held at that old railway station there. If you would know, there's an old railway station that has been made into a convention center now.
Oh yeah. I think it's called the Hamburg train station. I think it's a museum.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a museum and there's a conference thing there. And the second one was for some business trips that I came for. That was about it. Yeah. Okay, Marc. Anything else that I can be of service?
As of now, not so far. It's a lot of information that I will need to go through and process and evaluate, but that definitely makes it an interesting weekend for me now. So you're actually the last interview I will carry out, and that honestly brings everything perfectly together. So thank you a lot. This will be an interesting weekend, just reviewing everything I heard. And thank you so far.
Best of luck for your bachelor's and best of luck for your the job that you're going to join. I wish you the best of your future. Let's stay connected over LinkedIn. Yeah,
will do. Would appreciate that. Best of luck for you, or like not luck, you best of success in your new job. Thank you so much for taking the time, and have a nice weekend.
You too, man.
Goodbye.
Bye.